KSMQ Public Television. Eric Olson here with a special edition of On Cue. We're bringing some context to the COVID-19 discussion. Specifically, did you get your check yet? You know what we're talking about. We're talking, of course, about the stimulus funding approved in Washington, part of the CARES Act, approved in March. We're joined now by Professor Larry Jacobs, Director of the Center for Study of Politics and Governance at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs at the University of Minnesota. His most recent book is entitled Fed Power, How Finance Wins, published by Oxford University Press. A great thrill to have you with us, Professor Jacobs.
It's great to be with you. Thank you.
We're going to dive into the political and the practical of this. I mean, you've studied the politics in Washington your whole career. This has been a remarkable few weeks in the history of Washington, has it not been? In just the size, for instance, of this CARES Act, $2 trillion relief package passed on a bipartisan voice vote and signed by the president.
Yeah, if you think about sports analogies, this is like one of those records. First off, you had an enormous amount of money that went out the door. There were actually three different relief bills. The CARES Act was the third one. And we've also saw, as you said, coming together of both parties, of course, with the usual sort of bickering to the end. But it was done fast, and there was a lot of money put out there. And, the country is facing unprecedented crisis. I mean, you go back to the Great Depression, that thing was building and played out over a number of years. Up until January, everyone thought the economy was doing fine. Lots of people had good jobs, and we were talking about expansion going through this year. And with a blink of an eye, or in this case, the sweeping over us of the coronavirus, all that has gone. Congress has acted, but unfortunately, you had several different dynamics playing out in Washington that has really created problems around the country in getting the help that was passed to the people who matter in America.
And what were those? What are they?
Well, just as a general matter, the government doesn't like to just send checks everywhere. There are a bunch of watchdogs, and Congress has oversight, and you could end up going to jail if you misspend money. So there are rules. So the first hurdle was just, how do we get the money out fast without letting it get bogged down in the rules? So some people have hit that, or we've had millions of people needing help, and the computers were set up to handle tens of thousands, maybe 100 or 200,000. And all of a sudden we had millions of people. So the computers crashed. So you got rules, you've got computer problems. Now here's the third part, and it comes to this issue about who's organized and who has friends. And the banks were the big banks were the ones who were doling out the money. And we now know that they were doling out the money first and foremost to their clients. These are large companies that had been doing business with the big banks and a lot of business. So they were given preferential treatment, while the mom and pop shops were rarely getting that money.
Do you think that that'll get rectified? We see in individual stories coming out about companies not accepting the funds, giving them back. Is it ever going to get to the right people?
Well, I'm hopeful it is. We'll see how much of that money goes back. Somehow, money going back to the government is less common than going from the other way around. But there has been more money sent to the Small Business Bureau, and there are new rules. And I think Washington, in particular, the Trump administration, has gotten the message that the whole country is outraged by how this has played out. And we know that many of our neighbors who run small businesses, which are a large part of the job creation in America, those people are on the edge. Now, here's a silver lining. Minnesota was number 3 in the country in getting those small business grants. And the reason for that is that we had the infrastructure, that the Chamber of Congress and other business organizations were ready to act. They have been organized for other purposes, but as soon as this crisis hit, they turned their kind of help machinery to small businesses and really gave Minnesota a tremendous advantage. It's so much of an advantage that other states were complaining about the favoritism for Minnesota. It wasn't favoritism. It was just we had our act together. We were very well organized. And so if people have questions about how they can get access to these small business loans, they should contact the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. You can go online. There's a very helpful video right at the top of the page that's going to give you a lot of the information you need. And if that's not enough, call the chamber. These are really helpful people.
Okay. Our little nonprofit, we were able to take advantage of that also for for a little bit of our payroll. Uh, we were successful, which is going to be very helpful in this time. With the people you talk to and deal with, what's the mood in Washington right now with this COVID? I mean, on the one hand, you've got government leaders saying, don't panic, don't worry, we're on top of this thing. And then on the other hand, they're giving all this huge amount of money out. That's kind of a harbinger of future problems.
Well, there's two parts of the story. One part is, I think we're all fearful of this virus for which there is no known cure and no effective vaccine that's been discovered yet. It's why a lot of us are huddling in our houses if we can. So that's one issue. And I think there's a lot of uncertainty about that. There's obviously a debate going on around the country about how do we get the economy going again? How do we get people back to work? My hunch is that's going to be very slow. A lot of consumers and a lot of workers are anxious and would rather just stay at home rather than go back out there. But that's going to play out slowly, I think, over the coming months. The other issue, the second issue, is when all of us pull back from our jobs and from going to restaurants and shopping, it was like a cardiac arrest for our economy. And to be honest, the people I talk to in government here in Minnesota and in Washington are most alarmed about that because you can't just go up like it's a light switch and turn on the economy again. We've got 30 million people at least out of work. We've got all sorts of supply chains between companies that have been disrupted. We've got trading partnerships with other countries that we're part of. We're supplying parts or we're getting parts from around the world. All that has been suspended. So it's going to take time to get that back together. And that's the part that I frankly hear the most alarm about. We've got to get the country open. We've got to get people back to work. Just to give you a very practical challenge. Back in January or February, Minnesota had $1.3 billion surplus. We're going to get the budget surplus next week. We'll be in a deficit. Now, our Constitution tells us we cannot have a deficit. So we've got to find a way to cover that deficit with no new money coming in, or the possibility of no new money, or just a little bit of money coming in. How are we going to do that? And that's tied to the economy. So, I think you hear a lot of anxiety and concern about that.
A lot of your work falls into the healthcare world. It's a passion of yours. You've done a lot of research. All these stories that have come out late since this COVID of all the heroes really of our country who work in the front lines in healthcare. Do you think that all of this, what's happening, will help overall begin a dialogue to actually get some sense into the healthcare management system on the part of the government?
We've had a debate about health reform for more than a century. So I don't think that's going to stop. Um, I do think, as you said, that the doctors and the nurses and the orderlies, the people who have made our hospitals and our doctors' offices run during this crisis, they are our heroes. And those of us who know people who are working in those situations, it's beyond belief. I mean, it's really like the first responders at 9/11. These medical personnel are literally running into the metaphorical equivalent of a burning building. And I think all of us are grateful for that. Um, I think in terms of the healthcare system, we clearly have a lot of problems that we have to deal with. I do think we've gotten to the point where there's a growing number of people who appreciate that we need to have health insurance and health coverage for everybody. Now, that used to be a controversial statement, but let's just be practical about this. If you've got a neighbor who doesn't have health insurance, he comes down with the coronavirus, he doesn't seek health care. That person then becomes what's referred to as a super spreader. No, we want that person to have health coverage. We want them to seek medical help, and we want them to not be a threat to all of us. And that basic idea, I think, is starting to filter out, and we're actually seeing Republicans providing support, including money, for the country's health insurance system in a way that we didn't see, even a year or two ago.
And this passage, we should say also of the stimulus, this is all just deficit spending, correct?
You know, I worry about a bunch of things, but we're looking like we may be running a $3 to $4 trillion budget deficit. Our deficit is going to be greater than the entire productivity of our economy before this crisis. And we're going to continue to spend money. So the situation is going to get more dire in terms of our deficit. Now, we're in the middle of a crisis, and this may not be the time to start adding up our budgets, but we've got to take a hard look at what we're doing. We're a big country, we're a rich country, but this can't go on forever. Somewhere along the line, we've got to figure out how much taxes do we need to pay for what we want, and if there's spending that we can bring down. And at this point, I think it's kind of like Christmas in Washington, where it's just the spending part and not really the hard thinking.
Mhm. Well, Professor Jacobs, we thank you for your time. But before we run off, personal news for you. Congratulations are in order, being named to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. First fellow from the Humphrey School. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. This is something that is it's rare. It doesn't happen very much. Just a few of us are selected, and I'm greatly honored. The support I've had for a number of years from University of Minnesota, the Humphrey School, Department of Political Science, who've said to me again and again, do the research and try to be relevant to the public conversations. And frankly, I feel very fortunate. I've really been treated so well by Minnesotans and our great university.
Well, it's great for the state and for you, mentors like Vice President Mondale. Very, very proud.
Yeah, I've been lucky. I've had the opportunity to work with Vice President Mondale in teaching a class for 15 years. It's not partisan. I'm not a partisan. The course is on national security. It's on how we defend our country and abide by the Constitution. And we've had in Republicans and Democrats. We've had in a lot of people from the intelligence services, Justice Department. It's really been a credible string. We've had thousands of students coming through the class, and I'm very fortunate with that. I've also worked with a lot of Republicans. I just had the top-ranking Republican in the legislature on with me yesterday for an online program. His name is Paul Gazelka, and we had a terrific conversation. That's available online if folks want to check that out.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Professor Larry Jacobs. Happy to have your views.
Thank you very much, Eric. I appreciate the invitation.
You bet. And for now, I'm Eric Olson. That'll do it for now. KSMQ Public Television.